Fire. Here's what fire actually did to your ancestors' math. Raw meat takes hours to chew and digest, and most of its energy gets burned just breaking it down. Cook that same meat, and the body spends a fraction of the effort extracting nearly double the calories. That's not a small win. That's a permanent raise. Every single day for the rest of human history, cooking food handed people back hours they used to spend chewing. Hours that went straight into making tools, raising children, building shelter, thinking. Fire also solved the temperature problem. Cold used to be a hard boundary. Go too far from the equator, and you died. Fire moved that boundary. Suddenly, land nobody could survive on became livable, which means suddenly there was more usable land on Earth than there'd ever been before. More usable land, more free hours, more calories per meal. That's not folklore. That's the first compound interest account in human history, and it's still paying out. Agriculture. Here's the actual trade agriculture forced humans to make. Give up daily guaranteed food from foraging in exchange for a much bigger payout months later, if nothing went wrong. That's a terrifying bet on paper, but look at what it unlocked once it worked. A hunter-gatherer can only carry as much food as their body needs that week. A farmer can grow 10 times what one family eats and store the rest. Storage is the actual invention hiding inside agriculture. The moment you can stockpile grain, you've created something that never existed before, a surplus. And a surplus means not every single person has to spend their day finding food anymore. That's the exact mechanism that built the first cities. Farmers fed the surplus to people who weren't farming. Builders, soldiers, record keepers, rulers. One farmer's extra bushel of wheat became someone else's entire career. Animal domestication. Here's the actual economics of domestication. An ox eats grass, which is free, and in exchange, it can pull a plow with roughly 6 times the force of a person. That ratio is the whole story. Before oxen, clearing and plowing a field was a brutal multi-week job for several adults. After oxen, one farmer with one animal could plow the same field in a fraction of the time, using an energy source that cost nothing but pasture. Horses did the same trick for distance instead of force. A message that took a runner 3 days on foot took a rider on horseback less than 1. That's not a minor speed boost. That's the difference between an empire that can coordinate across a continent and one that can't hold together past its own capital. Every domesticated animal was really just a cheap engine running on grass instead of fuel, freeing up human labor for something more valuable than pulling and carrying. Irrigation. Here's the mechanism nobody explains clearly. A river only waters the land it touches, and it does that on its own schedule, not yours. Irrigation broke that limitation on purpose. Dig a channel, and suddenly a field a mile from the riverbank gets water on the day the farmer decides, not the day the river decides. That single shift, controlling water instead of just receiving it, multiplied the amount of farmable land around a river by several times over. But here's the part that actually built wealth: predictability. A farmer who knows exactly how much water is coming and when can plan a harvest with confidence instead of gambling on rainfall. Confidence is what let farmers commit to bigger fields, more labor, and riskier crops, because the water supply was no longer the wild card. Multiply that certainty across thousands of farms along the same river, and you get something new. A food surplus reliable enough to support a permanent city instead of just a seasonal camp. Writing. An idea that only exists in one person's head is worth exactly what that person can do with it alone in their lifetime. Writing broke that ceiling completely. Before it, a farmer who discovered a better crop rotation could only teach it to the people standing in front of him. After writing, that same discovery could travel to a village he'd never visit, get read by someone born after he died, and still change how they farmed. The idea outlived the person who had it. That's the actual economic unlock. Knowledge stopped being trapped inside individual humans and became a transferable asset, copyable at almost no cost beyond the ink and the surface it was written on. A good idea could now spread faster than the person who had it could ever travel. Every patent, every textbook, every instruction manual today is running on that same principle. The value isn't in having an idea, it's in getting that idea into as many hands as possible. Mathematics. You can't touch a number, and yet numbers built every bridge and every rocket that's ever left the ground. Before mathematics matured into a real toolkit, builders tested things the hard way. Build it, see if it collapses, try again. Math let people skip straight to the answer. Calculate the load a beam can hold before cutting a single piece of wood. Predict where a ship will be in 3 days before it leaves port. That's not a convenience. That's the difference between wasting a year of labor on a guess and getting it right the first time. Here's the part that actually multiplies wealth. Math let humans model reality instead of just reacting to it. A merchant could calculate profit margins before shipping a single crate. An engineer could calculate stress before pouring concrete. Being right in advance, instead of finding out the hard way, saves resources every single time it's used. Every industry on this list, from here forward, runs silently on top of this one. Coinage. Before coins, trading required something almost absurd. You needed to find someone who had exactly what you wanted, and who also happened to want exactly what you had. Economists call that the double coincidence of wants. In practice, it made most trades impossible. Coinage solved it with a trick. Invent a token everyone agrees is valuable, and suddenly nobody needs to want your specific goods anymore. A farmer could sell wheat for coins and use those same coins to buy shoes from someone who had zero interest in wheat at all. That single fix unlocks specialization at scale. Once you don't need a direct trade match, you can focus entirely on getting good at one thing: farming, blacksmithing, weaving, and trust that coins will convert your output into whatever you actually need. Money was never really about the metal. It was about removing the biggest obstacle standing between two people who wanted to trade. Roads. A road doesn't grow anything, build anything, or make anything, and yet it might be one of the highest return investments in human history. Here's why. Every good ever made has to get from where it's produced to where it's needed, and that journey has a cost. Before roads, moving a wagon of grain across rough terrain could take days and break half your cargo along the way. A paved, maintained road cut that time and damage dramatically, which meant the same wagon could now carry goods further, faster, and cheaper than before. That drop in transport cost did something subtle but massive. It expanded how far a producer's market could reach. A farmer who could only sell within a day's walk suddenly had access to towns a week away. More potential buyers means more potential profit off the exact same harvest. Empires that built serious road networks, Rome being the obvious case, didn't just move armies faster, they moved wealth faster in every direction all the time. Sailing ships. A wagon can carry maybe a ton of cargo, slowly, across land full of obstacles. A single ship, moving with the wind for free, could carry hundreds of tons across open water where nothing stood in the way at all. That difference in capacity changed the entire math of trade. Goods too heavy or bulky to justify moving by land, grain, timber, stone, ore, suddenly became profitable to ship in bulk across oceans. And because wind was the fuel, the cost per ton dropped even further than roads ever could. Here's the compounding effect. Coastal cities with good harbors didn't just get access to the sea, they got access to every other port connected to it. A trader in Venice wasn't just trading with Italy, he was one voyage away from Alexandria, Constantinople, anywhere a ship could reach. Wealth, historically, pooled wherever water met ambition, because ships turned the entire ocean into one continuous, low-cost highway. Iron tools. Bronze built the first great civilizations, but bronze needed tin, and tin was rare, expensive, and often had to be imported from far away, which meant only the wealthy could really arm or equip themselves with it. Iron changed the equation completely. It's common, found nearly everywhere, and once smelting techniques improved, it could be worked into tools and weapons harder and cheaper than bronze ever managed. Suddenly, a regular farmer could own an iron plow blade instead of a wooden one. A regular soldier could carry an iron sword instead of watching only nobles afford bronze ones. That's the real shift. Iron democratized hard tools. When better equipment stops being a luxury reserved for the elite and becomes something an ordinary person can own, entire populations get more productive at once. More land cleared, more crops planted, more goods made, all because the tools got both stronger and cheaper simultaneously. Water mills. For nearly all of human history, if you wanted something ground, lifted, or pressed, a human or an animal had to physically do it, muscle by muscle, hour by hour. The water mill broke that requirement entirely. Divert a stream over a wheel, and the moving water itself turns the gears, grinding grain into flour, pressing oil from seeds, all without a single person or ox providing the force. The energy was already there, flowing downhill for free. The mill just had to catch it. The wealth impact here is almost pure arithmetic. A hand quern might grind enough flour for one family in a day. A water mill could grind enough for an entire village in the same time, with nobody standing there turning it. That freed up labor. All the people who used to spend hours grinding grain by hand went somewhere else productive instead. This was humanity's first real glimpse of automation, centuries before the word existed. Windmills. Not every region had a reliable river, but almost everywhere had wind, and eventually someone figured out how to put it to work the same way water had been. Windmills spread fastest across flatter regions where water power was scarce, the Netherlands being the textbook case. There, windmills didn't just grind grain, they pumped water out of low-lying land, which is precisely what allowed the Dutch to reclaim entire sections of country from the sea and turn them into farmland. That's a strange kind of wealth creation, using free wind energy to literally manufacture more land to farm on. No river required, no fuel required, just air moving across a set of blades, doing work a small army of laborers would otherwise have to do by hand. Wherever the terrain said, "No water power," windmills quietly answered, "Doesn't matter."